Hi y'all, I'm Jackie from Chronically Jackie, and this is another video in my diagnosis discussion series. Due to my genetic mutations, I have several chronic illnesses, and in this video I'm going to further discuss my dysautonomia diagnosis. But before we continue, please keep in mind that everyone's chronic illness journey is individual to themselves, and these are my personal experiences which may differ from yours or someone you know. Also, be sure to check out the description for the other videos in my diagnosis discussion series and helpful links. So I have dysautonomia, which means autonomic nervous system dysfunction. Your autonomic nervous system, or ANS, is responsible for things we don't even think about, like breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, blood flow. So all of those bodily functions we don't think about don't work all that great for me. My specific form of dysautonomia is called POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which basically means my ANS cannot regulate blood flow correctly. My Ehlers-Danlos syndrome actually plays into my dysautonomia, and if you haven't already, I do recommend watching the EDS video in my diagnosis discussion series. But anyways, the lack of collagen from my EDS affects my blood vessels by making them loose and stretchy. The autonomic nervous system is meant to contract blood vessels at appropriate times to help with circulation, but this is very difficult to do with loose and stretchy vessels, further contributing to the problem. What ends up happening is blood pooling in my lower extremities, and since the blood is pooling rather than circulating appropriately, the ANS tries to compensate by making my heart beat very, very fast to get the blood moving. Unfortunately, it does not work out very well, and that is also the tachycardia aspect in POTS. It's obviously more difficult to circulate blood when we are standing because the ANS has to work against gravity. And although I can be symptomatic while laying or sitting, standing is way worse. The longer I am upright, the more symptomatic I become. And I can't walk very far without experiencing syncope or fainting. That is just one symptom of my dysautonomia, and others include, but are definitely not limited to, tachycardia, palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath, blood pressure fluctuations, dizziness, weakness, blood pooling, which can be painful, and fatigue. Fatigue is a big part of my POTS because my body has to work so much harder just to stay upright and do simple activities. Studies have even shown that the average POTS patient is expending energy as if we are constantly running in place. POTS also makes exercise very difficult because my already overexpended body is low on energy. But not only that, while exercising, my autonomic nervous system and heart have to work even harder to regulate those bodily functions that just can't regulate very well. So in order to stay active and healthy, I have to do safe, mostly supine exercises that work for me and my body. Heat and cold intolerance is another aspect of dysautonomia because the autonomic nervous system is responsible for temperature regulation. Heat is a very big issue for me because when your body becomes hot, it naturally dilates or expands your blood vessels. So my already faulty vessels become even looser and stretchier. Heat is actually a very big trigger for my syncope. The cold can present issues as well, as I find it difficult to stay warm, but for me personally, I do better in the cold than the heat. Although dysautonomia is gaining awareness in the medical community, back when I started having symptoms, it wasn't very widely known. I developed my POTS at 15 years old, and among other symptoms, I was fainting very frequently. But it wasn't until 5 years later that I finally received a proper diagnosis. At 20 years old, an autonomic specialist ordered a tilt table test. How this test is performed can vary a bit from patient to patient, but for me personally, it was non-invasive and non-painful, but it can bring out some pretty uncomfortable symptoms. During my test, I almost passed out. What they do is lay you flat on a table and then bring you upright while measuring heart rate and blood pressure. And a significant increase in heart rate, as well as other symptoms I had during the test, is what led to my dysautonomia and POTS diagnoses. Because POTS can vary from warrior to warrior, treatment plans will differ as well. My main approaches are POTS-safe exercises, medications, and intravenous fluids. The IV fluids do help me the most because an additional complication I face due to my dysautonomia is hypovolemia, or low blood volume, and the IV fluids help to expand my blood volume. I also use mobility devices when needed. If my dizziness, fatigue, or syncope is making it too difficult or unsafe for me to walk, I'll use a walker, specifically one with a seat so I can take a break when needed, or a wheelchair, more so for longer distances. I see these things as tools to help me live my best possible life and stay safe while also remaining independent. And you can learn more about all of my treatments by following the links in the description. Dysautonomia can be so tricky because the autonomic nervous system is incredibly complicated and it's involved in so many functions of our body. But I tackle it the best I can and keep moving forward. I hope this video on my dysautonomia was helpful, and thank you so much for joining in on my diagnosis discussion series.